Hey y'all, so today we're going to be jumping back into chapter 5 in the book Women Who Run with the Wolves, and the title of chapter 5 is Hunting When the Heart is a Lonely Hunter. And I hope that you can hear me okay today. This is the sickest I've been, the sickest day I've had lately, so I'm okay, I'm hanging in there, but there's just been a little bit of sickness going through the family, so just bear with me. And once again, you might have to turn the volume up a little bit and just overlook my episodes of coughing my head off. I'll try to cut them out as I can. So but the next section in chapter 5 we're going to dive into today is called Giving the Tear. And this one I really didn't expect, because when we went through the story of Skeleton Woman, I wasn't really sure, you know, all the symbolism, because these stories that she shares with us in this book are very rich in symbolism. I mean, down to the tiny little details. So I didn't realize that this tear, I kind of thought it would be symbolic, but it's a lot deeper, a lot more of a heartfelt, important message than I realized it would be. So we're going to take our time with this, and hopefully this will inspire you and give you some things to think about. And so let's get into it. Okay, so the first paragraph in this section recalls the scene in the story of Skeleton Woman where the fisherman is asleep and he has a tear coming down from his eye. So we're going to read about that. It says, as he sleeps, a tear is released from the corner of his eye. Skeleton Woman spies it, is filled with thirst, and awkwardly crawls to him to drink from the cup of his eye. What, we ask, could he be dreaming that would cause such a tear to come forth? And then she goes into the backstory of tears throughout different folklore and myths and fairy tales, and how they're very symbolic. And she says, this tear of passion and compassion is most often wept after the accidental finding of treasure, which she's already talked about, after the fearful chase, after the untangling, for it is the combination of these that causes the exhaustion, the disassembling of defenses, the facing of oneself, the stripping down to the bones, the desire for both knowledge and relief. These cause a soul to peer into what the soul truly wants, and to weep for loss and love of both. Okay, hey y'all. So I had to take a break early on in the video and take some medicine. I was feeling pretty rough, so we're going to go ahead and continue now. Thanks for being patient with me. So the next paragraph after what I just read to you says, as surely as Skeleton Woman was brought to the surface, now this tear, this feeling in the man, is also brought to the surface. It is an instruction in loving both self and another. Stripped now of all the bristles and hooks and sheaves of the daytime world, the man draws Skeleton Woman to lie beside him, to drink and be nourished by his deepest feeling. In his new form, he is able to feed the thirsty other. Her ghost has been summoned by his weeping. Ideas and powers from far off in the psychic world unite over the warmth of his tear. And then, so to me, this, it's almost like, and remember, Skeleton Woman is not representative of, like, his partner, even though the story is about, the acknowledging, what she calls the not beautiful in yourself and also in your partner. So it does relate to relationships heavily. And so I keep getting confused. I keep thinking that Skeleton Woman is representative of his partner. And that's not true. Skeleton Woman is representative of the not beautiful, the thing she calls the not beautiful, the author. And so it's a process. I view what I just read to you as a process of It says facing the self, and the facing of oneself, the stripping down to the bones, the desire for both knowledge and relief. So these are our internal struggles. And this is going to be different for each of us. And depending on our circumstances, we may face these things alone. We may I'm not talking about the experience of these things, like say childhood wounds, but I'm talking about like the processing and the healing of these things. We may go through that alone, or we may go through this in a relationship with someone. So it's relevant regardless. Skeleton woman, the process of meeting her and untangling her from the line, and just like I was reading there, it explains how when he's fishing in the boat, that's representative of just your normal consciousness, where you're not facing these hard, deep things that are buried in another layer of your consciousness. So you're just going about your day, your routines and things like that. And I know that that's true because it says, once he gets back to the cabin or the house and he gets intimate with Skeleton Woman, it says, stripped now of all the bristles and hooks and shivs of the daytime world. So it's kind of like in the story when he's fishing, that's just your day-to-day life, before you've really come to terms with and been willing to dissect unresolved issues within yourself or within your relationship, within your partnership, with your significant other. And so the point where you're ready to face hard things and to deal with hard things and to go through the healing process, that's the process of being intimate with Skeleton Woman. And so there's a certain kind of vulnerability. I wrote the word vulnerability out to the side of this section here. And it's a vulnerability whether you're going through this with a partner or not, because you have to be so vulnerable with yourself. It's hard to admit some things that maybe you've buried for a long time. So what I'm talking about here is like not intentional. It's just coping. You know what I mean? It's like, say for example, in your childhood you experienced bullying or abuse, and maybe you didn't know how to get free of it, or you couldn't get free of it because of your circumstances, and so you developed in that while you're going through it, you developed coping mechanisms. And as an adult, or I guess even as like a young adult, some people turn to addictions, to alcohol and drugs as coping. And then what can happen is, whether it's behaviors or addictions or whatever it is, we can carry these coping mechanisms into our adulthood. And it winds up becoming like, part of us, our personality. But they're very destructive. And along this same lines with them being destructive in terms of importance. And also, essentially, they're keeping us from being who we would be. Who we would truly be had we not gone through the abuse or whatever the issues were that resulted in these coping mechanisms. So the goal is to do whatever work we need to do facing hard things in ourselves. In other words, letting go of the coping mechanisms, letting go of the addictions, breaking the addictions, becoming conscious of the destructive behaviors and mannerisms that we may have that we're not even aware of, becoming conscious of that, striving to be our best self and to let go of those things, so that it's kind of like peeling layers, so that you can come face to face with wounds, old wounds, and feel the feelings. I'm coughing my head off. In my healing journey, early in my healing journey, and I'm just thinking about how amazing God is. I have to say this because one of the most impactful people I met early in my journey, I didn't meet in the context of therapy or, being a partner to help me walk on this path of healing. I met this person in context of, we shared a love for creativity, for making things, crafts. And so as I got to know her, we got to be friends. Excuse me. She was going through a career change and some big changes and shifts in her life. And we got to know each other, and she started to offer some alternative healing modalities, and all backed up. I mean, she has an incredible background and has been trained in so many different areas. And so one of the things that she used in helping me, because I did wind up hiring her as sort of a life coach in the early stages of my healing, after I became aware of the narcissism of my life, and then I started questioning how I got into that to begin with, and then why I stayed for so long, things like that. And that's when I started looking at, old wounds from my childhood and such. And it's really interesting to look into this, and that's why I'm telling you about this. You don't always have to have all the answers. You don't always have to look at everything from a place of analyzing and taking in information, just loads and loads and loads of information in your goal to heal, so much as take a look at simply approaching healing by feeling the feelings. There's a lot of research out there that you'll find on this very topic, because sometimes the answers are not readily available even in our own conscious awareness. And so the way you can access things is through your emotions. It's just like you'll hear different life coaches and maybe even therapists talk about listening to your body, because sometimes, and boy, I have some experience with that in my life, where I ignored my body's reactions. But a lot of times our body will alert us to danger before our mind will. And so it's about getting in touch with feelings and how that aligns with our body, our breathing. So there's a lot of different approaches to truly go through some deep, deep healing, to be able to release addictions, to be able to release unhealthy coping mechanisms of any kind, or undesirable behavior traits that may have been part of your conditioning in an unhealthy or toxic environment in childhood growing up. So just take a look into that. I'll drop some information down in the description in a day or two when I get a chance about what it's called. But there's a lot of different modalities and approaches to being able to bring old wounds up from your buried layers of consciousness, so that you can meet them head on and deal with them and face them and truly heal once and for all. So that's kind of what I view, and I can say that from experience. That's kind of how I view Skeleton Woman. And she is scary, but when you're willing to do it, it is very transformative. And then you're ready. Then you're ready to, it's like you're free at that point. You don't have you're not carrying these chains around anymore. And so it's like, as long as you're not truly healed, you are somewhat bound by these invisible chains. So the goal is to truly heal, and then you're going to be able to just be content and be positioned, if you choose and would like, to be in a very healthy relationship with someone. So it says, the history of the symbol of water as creator, as pathway, is long and varied. So she talks again about water being symbolic of creation. And so remember in the story when Skeleton Woman drank his tear, she started to flesh out. And you could take that, this is just me talking, okay, not the author. You could take that symbolism to mean what I was just telling you about. Bringing, as Skeleton Woman fleshes out and becomes real and whole and healthy again, it could be symbolic of when you are feeling those feelings. You're healing, even if it's not thoughts that you're thinking and breaking things down logically. You're feeling the feelings that maybe you ignored for many years because you thought it was the right thing to do to push through. You thought it was the right thing to do not to cry. Sometimes we're taught not to cry, to suck it up and move on, or be a man. You know what I mean? And so you don't always have to have all the information. Sometimes it's just getting still and quiet and letting those feelings come up and being brave enough to feel them. Even if you can't make sense of them, even if you can't align explanation to them, you still receive the healing. That's the amazing thing. And for me, that was the approach I took. I allowed myself to feel some strong feelings in my healing process. And then it was almost like that in itself peeled the layers off of my conscious awareness, and I was able to remember things and connect the dots and understand, oh, there really are some areas, that were painful in my life. And consequently, that made me a target for being taken advantage of by a manipulator. So it's really an incredible process. So let's keep going. I'm going to read a little bit more. The tear of the dreamer comes when a lover-to-be allows himself to feel and to bind up his own wounds. When he allows himself to see the self-destruction he has wrought by his loss of faith in the goodness of self. When he feels cut away from the nurturing and revivifying cycle of the life-death-life nature. Then he weeps, for he feels his loneliness, his acute homesickness for that psychic place, for that wild knowing. This is the man healing, the man growing in understanding. He takes on his own medicine making. He takes on the task of feeding the deleted other. Through his tears, he begins to create. To love another is not enough. To be not an impediment in the life of the other is not enough. It is not enough to be supportive and there for them and all the rest. The goal is to be knowledgeable about the ways of life and death in one's own life and in panorama. The only way to be a knowing man is to go to school in the bones of Skeleton Woman. She is waiting for the signal of deep feeling, that one tear that says, I admit the wound. I admit the wound. This admission feeds the life-death-life nature, causes the bond to be made, and the deep knowing in a man to begin. We all have made the mistake of thinking someone else can be our healer, our thriller, our feeling. It takes a long time to find it is not so, mostly because we put the wound outside ourselves instead of ministering to it within. There is probably nothing a woman wants more from a man than for him to dissolve his projections and face his own wound. When a man faces his wound, the tear comes naturally, and his loyalties within and without are made clearer and stronger. He becomes his own healer. He is no longer lonely for the deeper self. He no longer applies to the woman to be his analgesic. So it's almost like there's a wound here in the fisherman that, we don't know about until we see this process he goes through with Skeleton Woman. And it appears that what she's saying, and it's representative for a lot of us, what she's saying is that a lot of times we run from facing the things that hurt us. Cough drops. Okay. And so when he's giving the tear in the story, he's made the decision to stop running from it. Because what do we do when we cry? We're feeling hard things when we cry. It says the tear of compassion is wept in response to realizing the stinking wound. The stinking wound has different configurations and sources for each person. For some, it means spending a lifetime pulling oneself up the mountain, hand over hand, belatedly, to find we've been working our way up the wrong mountain. For some, it is unresolved and unmedicated issues of abuse in childhood. When the man cries the tear, he has come upon his pain, and he knows it when he touches it. He sees how his life has been lived protectively because of the wound. He sees what of life he has missed because of it. He sees how he hamstrings his love for life, for himself, and for another. In fairy tales, tears change people, remind them of what is important, and save their very souls. Only a hardness of heart inhibits weeping and union. There is a saying, a prayer really, among the Sufis, asking God to break one's heart. Shatter my heart so a new room can be created for a limitless love. The internal feeling of tenderness that moves the fisherman to untangle Skeleton Woman also allows him to feel other forgotten longings, to resurrect his self-compassion, because he is in a state of innocence, that is, thinking all things are possible. He is unafraid to say his soul desires. He is unafraid to wish, for he believes his need will be met. It is a great relief for him to believe his soul will be fulfilled. When the fisherman cries his true feeling, the reunion with the life-death-life nature is furthered. I thought that was beautiful. In this story, the fisherman is letting his heart break. Not break down, but break open. It talks about the types of love that this is not. It's not the love of fame or sexuality or power or anything like that. It says it is a love that comes upon him, a love he has always carried within him but has never acknowledged before. A man's soul is seated more deeply and more clearly as he apprehends this relationship. The tear comes. She drinks. Now something else will develop and be reborn within him, something he can give to her, a vast and oceanic heart. So what this seems to be saying is, in general, I imagine, narcissism aside for a minute, probably applies to a lot of us, we're not truly able to offer our full selves the way love should be to another person until we have done the work on ourselves that we need to do to heal our wounds. Because until we do that, it's kind of like we're not really being our true selves. We're operating, through those, like I mentioned earlier, through those coping mechanisms that may not be healthy, and or addictions, things like that. So in a perfect world, but again, it's not a perfect world. it's a fallen world. In a perfect world, we would get all this taken care of before we attempted a union with another. But because it's a fallen world, sometimes we go through this process together, together with our partner. And if we have a loving and patient and empathetic partner, I think that this can work sometimes if both people are working on themselves and are committed. So just something to think about. And I know this has been kind of broken and different than usual. I hope that you still got something out of it, even with all the the choppiness here. And I'm hoping I can go ahead and continue with another video for you tomorrow, and hopefully I'll feel better and it'll come out a little bit easier and more fluid. But I hope that this touched your heart in some way, and I hope you got something out of it, and got some things to think about. And just thank you guys for coming along with me, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you soon.